I never thought I'd be here. The words echoed in my mind as I stood at the back of the grand ballroom, watching the crowd of well-dressed elites, the clinking of champagne glasses and the soft murmur of conversation floating in the air. But none of that mattered tonight. Not the glimmering chandeliers, not the lavish decor, and certainly not the sea of people I'd spent my life trying to impress. My focus, my attention, was fixed on one person. Samantha, there she was, standing on stage, accepting an award she had earned for her groundbreaking environmental research. For years, I had thought she'd never get this far without me. I thought she'd fade into the background of my success, as so many others had. But there she was, holding the trophy in her hands, her smile radiant, her confidence undeniable. She had outgrown me. Her dress sparkled under the spotlight, the navy blue fabric shimmering, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was the strength in her posture, the way she stood so tall, so sure of herself, that struck me the hardest. She wasn't the woman I'd once known, weak, dependent on my success. No, she had become a force of her own. And that realization hit me like a freight train. I couldn't help but glance across the room at our daughter, Emily. She stood beside Samantha, proud and strong, her face a mirror of Samantha's, yet with a quiet, fierce independence that reflected mine. She was 11 now, and I had missed every moment of her childhood. 11 years that I could never get back, and that was all on me. Samantha was thriving without me, and Emily, my daughter, was growing up with a mother who had always been there, who had been everything she needed, while I stood on the sidelines, blind to the life I had abandoned. I had always believed that power, success, and wealth were what defined a man. But now, as I stood in that ballroom, watching Samantha accept an award that was hers and hers alone, I realized how wrong I had been. What good was it all if I had lost everything that truly mattered? Maxwell Richards, the CEO, the man who thought he could control everything, stood there watching the woman he once loved stand tall, winning what was rightfully hers. The very thing I had dismissed for years, not even realizing the cost of it, and now I was left with nothing but the realization that I had failed as a husband, as a father, and as a man. Samantha's eyes didn't even linger on me as she stepped down from the stage, her gaze directed at the crowd that adored her. She had moved on both emotionally and professionally. Meanwhile, I stood, frozen, aware of how small I had become. All the wealth, the power, the accolades, they suddenly felt meaningless, because Samantha had done it without me. And Emily, she had done it without me too. I didn't know when I had stopped being the man who could control everything. But here I was, standing in the shadows of the woman I had once promised the world, realizing I had failed to give her even the smallest part of it. I could still feel the weight of the room pressing down on me, even after Samantha had left the stage. The applause was deafening, but I didn't hear it. My mind was racing, thoughts colliding in my head, trying to piece together the last decade of my life. Maxwell Richards, the man who had conquered every challenge, who had risen from nothing to lead a global empire, stood there, lost. Samantha had been right there beside me, but I had let my obsession with business blind me to her needs, to Emily's needs. I thought I could fix everything with more money, more success, more of everything. I thought I could make up for everything I had neglected. But now I saw how hollow that belief had been. I turned away from the crowd, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, and stepped outside into the cool night air. The fresh breeze didn't help clear my mind, but it did remind me of how far I had fallen. For all the power I had, I was nothing compared to Samantha. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, without my help, without anyone to lean on. She had thrived, and here I was, stuck in my own failure. The truth hit me like a slap in the face. The empire I had built, the billions I had earned, meant nothing now. Samantha had created a life for herself and Emily, and I had missed it all. Emily, my daughter, had grown up without me. I had ignored every milestone, every birthday, every moment that mattered. But as much as the guilt tore at me, something else was building inside. It was anger, but not just at Samantha. It was at myself. I thought about how we had met, how everything between us had seemed so simple once. Back when Samantha was still Elena, before the layers of corporate deals and expectations. I had watched her grow in ways I had never imagined, her intelligence and ambition matching mine, maybe even surpassing it. But I had never truly seen her. It had all started so differently. I remembered the early days, her fresh ideas, her energy. Back then, I had been fascinated by her ambition, by how she didn't let anyone or anything stand in her way. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped listening. I had stopped being the man who encouraged her, the man who stood by her side. I had started to see her as an asset, a trophy, something to show off in meetings and at events. And now, I had nothing. I was the one who had pushed her to the edge. The one who had told her that her research, her work, didn't matter. That it didn't fit into the world I had created. I had made her choose between being my wife and being the scientist she had always dreamed of being. But now, standing outside that ballroom, watching her walk away with her reward, with Emily by her side, I realized how wrong I had been. I thought my success would matter more than anything else, but it hadn't. All the accolades, the money, the power, none of it mattered, because what I had failed to see was that the real value had always been in her. The woman I had pushed away, Samantha, didn't need me anymore. She had rebuilt her life without me. She had built something that mattered, that changed the world. I had built something that, in the end, felt shallow and empty. As I walked back into the building, I knew I couldn't let this moment slip away. I had to talk to her. I had to make things right, at least for Emily's sake. I couldn't just stand by and watch them live their lives without me. It wasn't just my pride on the line anymore, it was my chance at redemption. I spotted Julian across the room, Samantha's colleague, and, I had to admit, something more. The man who had become the rock in her life. He was everything I wasn't. Supportive, grounded, his calm, steady demeanor was everything I had never been. And now, he was the one standing by her side, the one who had helped her achieve everything she had. I hated that, but at the same time, I couldn't help but envy it. Julian looked at me and took a step toward me, his eyes narrowing, studying me like he always did. He had a way of seeing through people, especially me. "You okay, Maxwell?" he asked, his voice neutral, but there was a hint of something in a tar warning. "Maybe, I don't know," I admitted, my voice betraying the confusion I was feeling. "I'm not okay. I don't think I ever was." Julian raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything for a moment. He just studied me, waiting for me to continue. And I did. "I messed up, Julian. I messed up so badly that now I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix it." His gaze softened, but his expression remained measured. "The first step is admitting it," he said quietly. The next step is figuring out if you're willing to do the work, to show up for Samantha, for Emily. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. Show up. That's what I had failed to do all these years. I had not shown up for so long. I had been living in this bubble of self-importance, thinking that I could fix everything with money and power. But that wasn't the answer. Not anymore. Julian gave me one last look, then walked off, leaving me standing there, feeling more lost than ever. But I knew, deep down, that the only way forward was through. I had to face Samantha, face my past, and try to find a way to make things right if that was even possible. I took a deep breath. I didn't know how this would end, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to try. I found myself walking towards Samantha, my heart pounding in my chest. The decision to finally face her wasn't easy. It never is, especially when you know the consequences of your actions are far-reaching, far beyond what you initially imagined. But I couldn't keep running from it anymore. The guilt I felt, the weight of what I had lost, had become unbearable. I approached her slowly, but as I did, I couldn't help but notice how comfortable she seemed in this world, this new life she had built. She was surrounded by a group of environmental leaders, researchers, and philanthropists, all praising her for her groundbreaking work. She was no longer the woman I once knew, the woman I had controlled, shaped, and ultimately abandoned. Now she was someone entirely different, someone who had found her place, her purpose, and was thriving without me. Samantha had become a force, and I had been nothing but an obstacle in her way. I paused, standing just at the edge of the conversation, not wanting to interrupt but unsure how to approach her. The room around me felt like a blur, the voices and laughter muffled by the roar in my ears. But there she was, laughing, her eyes sparkling with life, the very life I had dismissed. And then she noticed me. Her gaze flicked to me for just a moment, a fleeting moment, but it was enough. I saw her stiffen, just a little. I saw the brief flash of recognition, but it was gone before I could read it. Samantha turned away, continuing to chat with her colleagues, but I could feel the tension in her posture. I had been expecting that, of course. I didn't expect her to welcome me with open arms. I wasn't sure what I expected, honestly, but I knew I had to say something, anything. I couldn't just stand there anymore, drowning in my own regret. I cleared my throat, took a few more steps toward her, and then finally spoke. Samantha. My voice was shaky, the words coming out more strained than I intended. Can we talk for a moment? Her eyes flicked toward me again, and this time she didn't look away immediately. She studied me for a second, her gaze scanning my face. I could see the hesitation, the wariness in her eyes. She didn't trust me anymore, and why should she? I had spent years proving to her that I wasn't worth trusting. I'm busy, Maxwell, she said coldly, her voice tight but polite. She turned back to the group, signaling that the conversation was over. I felt the sting of her words, but I couldn't give up. I couldn't let this moment slip away. I just need a minute. Please, I said, my voice more desperate now. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, but I needed her to hear me. Just a minute. Samantha hesitated again, looking at me with an unreadable expression. Then, finally, she excused herself from the group and stepped away, her heels clicking on the polished floor. We walked toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from prying eyes. I waited for her to say something, anything, but she stayed silent. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was unreadable, and I felt the tension between us grow with every second that passed. Finally, I spoke. "I never should have left you, Samantha," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I know I can't change what happened. I can't change the past, but I need you to understand. I regret it every single day. I regret losing you. I regret losing Emily." I paused, swallowing hard. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong. She stared at me, her expression unreadable. "You don't get to just regret it, Maxwell," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence. "You made a choice to put your career and your ambition above everything else. You chose your empire over your family. You chose that." Her eyes flashed with a mixture of hurt and anger, but there was something else in her gaze, something I hadn't expected. Pain. Genuine, raw pain. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. I felt the weight of everything I had done, everything I had failed to do. I had always prided myself on being a man of action, of doing whatever it took to succeed. But in my quest for success, I had lost everything that truly mattered. "Do you even understand, Maxwell?" Samantha continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you understand what it's like to give everything to someone, to sacrifice your dreams, your career, everything, and then have them turn around and leave you? To see everything you've worked for crumble because the person you loved most decided you weren't enough? That's what you did to me." I felt the sting of her words deep inside, but I knew she was right. I had taken everything from her, and for what? So I could build a bigger empire, so I could have more power, more control. I had dismissed her dreams, her ambitions, as secondary to mine, and now I was paying the price. "I didn't realize it at the time," I said, my voice softening. "I didn't realize what I was doing to you. To Emily, I thought I was doing the right thing by building this company, by securing our future. But I was wrong. I should have seen it. I should have seen you." I looked into her eyes, searching for something, anything, to show that there was a way forward. Samantha didn't speak immediately. She looked away, her gaze focused on something in the distance. When she finally looked back at me, her expression had softened, but the walls were still there. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Maxwell," she said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did, but I also know that I can't keep living in the past. I've moved on. I've built something, for me. For Emily." She paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And I'm not sure if there's space in my life for you anymore." Her words hit me harder than anything she had said before. I had hoped for a second chance, for some sign that things could be different. But in that moment, I realized that the past couldn't be undone. The damage had been done. I had lost her. "I understand," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt the finality in her words, the weight of it, and it was like a punch to the gut. But I couldn't argue with her. I had no right to. "I don't expect anything from you, Samantha. I never should have. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. She just looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she nodded. "Double quotes, goodbye, Maxwell," she said softly, before turning and walking away. And just like that, she was gone. I stood there, watching her disappear into the crowd, my heart heavy with regret. But as I turned to leave the ballroom, I realized something. It wasn't over. I had lost her. But maybe, just maybe, I could still do something to make things right. For Emily, for Samantha, for myself, but I didn't know what that would look like yet. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things were, and maybe, in time, I could rebuild. The days following my conversation with Samantha felt like a blur. The weight of what I had said and what she had said lingered in my mind, pressing on my chest as if it were a tangible thing. I had expected rejection, but I hadn't expected the finality in her words. She was moving on. She had found peace without me, without any need for my forgiveness, my approval, or my involvement. It stung in a way I couldn't describe, like something inside me was being hollowed out, piece by piece. I had lost her. And more than that, I had lost my daughter, Emily. The realization that I had been absent from her life for the entirety of her childhood, that I had been a ghost in the background of her upbringing, crushed me. I spent the next few weeks throwing myself into work, something I was good at. But even that felt different now. The high-pressure meetings, the long hours, the constant drive for success, it all felt like a distraction. A way to avoid facing the truth that no amount of business deals or investments would ever make up for the family. I had lost Maxwell Richards. The billionaire CEO had been reduced to nothing more than a man desperate for redemption. I had spent years building an empire, thinking it was the only thing that mattered, but now it all seemed meaningless. My heart ached with the realization that the only thing I truly needed was something I could never buy. Love, forgiveness, a second chance. The ache in my chest grew stronger with each passing day. And then, one evening, as I sat alone in my office overlooking the city, my phone buzzed with a notification. I didn't expect it. It was from Samantha. It was a short, simple message. We need to talk. Meeting again, I didn't know what to expect when I received that message. A part of me feared the worst. Samantha was going to tell me that everything was truly over, that she didn't want me to be a part of her or Emily's life anymore. But another part of me, the part that still cared for her despite everything, clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she was giving me one last chance to prove myself. I quickly responded, asking her when and where would be convenient to meet. She agreed to meet the following afternoon at a small cafe in downtown San Francisco, a place neither of us had been to in years. I wasn't sure what kind of conversation awaited me, but I knew I had to be there. I had to show up, because if I didn't, I would regret it forever. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early. I needed a moment to gather myself before seeing her again. The last time we spoke, it had been raw, emotional, and filled with so much tension. I had no idea how this would go, but I knew I couldn't back down now. When Samantha walked in, my heart skipped a beat. She looked exactly the same, and yet somehow completely different. Her posture was confident, her face glowing with a calm serenity that seemed to radiate from within. She wore a light, simple jacket over a blouse, casual but elegant, as if she had nothing to prove to anyone. But there was something else, an air of independence, of self-assuredness that I hadn't seen in her during our marriage. As soon as she sat down across from me, I felt a pang of guilt. I had failed to see the strength in her for so long. It was as if I was meeting her for the first time, and I realized that she was not the same woman who had been so devoted to me all those years ago. For a moment, we sat in silence, both of us unsure of how to begin. The noise of the cafe filled the air, but there was a quietness between us that was impossible to ignore. Finally, it was Samantha who spoke. I've been thinking a lot about everything. Maxwell, she said, her voice calm but firm. About what happened, about why it happened, and why I made the decisions I did. I nodded, trying to steady my breath. I didn't know what she was going to say, but I needed to hear it. I needed her to know that I was ready to listen, truly listen, for the first time in years. I'm not looking for an apology, Maxwell, she continued. I don't think there's anything you can say that will change the past. But I do need to tell you that I've forgiven you. Not for you, but for me. I was stunned. The words felt like a balm on a wound I hadn't even realized was still open. Forgiveness. It had always seemed like such a distant concept, something I would never have. But here she was, offering me something I thought I would never receive. For you, I asked, my voice breaking. Why for you? Samantha met my gaze, her eyes steady. Because holding on to the anger and the hurt, it only kept me chained to the past, and I refused to let that happen anymore. I had to forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve it. I had to move on, Maxwell, and I did. I've built a life for myself, for Emily, and now I'm finally at peace. The sincerity in her voice hit me harder than any reprimand she could have given me. For years, I had thought that I was the one who needed to be right, the one who deserved to be the hero in our story. But Samantha had shown me that sometimes the true strength comes from walking away, from choosing yourself even when it's the hardest thing to do. And Emily? I asked, almost afraid to bring her up. What about Emily? Samantha's expression softened. She's strong. She's brilliant. She's everything I hoped she would be. She doesn't need me to fight her battles for her, Maxwell. But she does need to know that you're here for her now, that you're willing to be the father she deserves. Her words stung, but they were the truth. I had missed so much time that I could never get back. And yet there was still a chance to be there for Emily, to be the father I should have been. I'm not asking for forgiveness from Emily either, I said quietly, the weight of my admission settling in. I just want to show her that I can be a part of her life, that I will be a part of her life from now on. Samantha nodded. She's already been through enough, Maxwell. But if you're truly ready to be there for her, to show up for her, then that's all she needs. There was a long pause. Samantha seemed to be searching my face, trying to gauge my sincerity. The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt ... right. I want to try, Samantha, I said, my voice steady now. I want to make things right. For Emily, for you, for me. I don't know if it's too late, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Samantha's eyes softened as she looked at me. It's never too late to try, Maxwell, but it will take time. Real time. I'll do whatever it takes, I repeated, my heart pounding with the weight of what I was promising. Samantha sat back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. I hope you understand that you have to make that change. For yourself, for Emily, for the woman you've become. And not just because of me, not because of anything I say. I nodded again, feeling the truth of her words settle in. It wasn't about what I thought I was entitled to. It was about being worthy of the people I had hurt, and that would take more than words, it would take action. The conversation wasn't over. It couldn't be. There was so much more to discuss, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally on the right path. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what that journey would bring. Samantha stood up, and I followed her. We exchanged a brief, meaningful glance before she turned to leave. "You know where to find me." "Maxwell," she said softly. I watched her walk out of the cafe, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance to rebuild this time. Not just for myself, but for the family I had once neglected. The weeks that followed were a blur. There were moments of clarity where everything seemed like it was falling into place. Then there were days where the weight of my past, mistakes would press down on me so heavily that I could barely breathe. But through it all, one thing was certain. I wasn't backing down. I had started showing up. For Samantha, yes, but most importantly, for Emily. I knew that I couldn't change the past, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I could ever earn their forgiveness. But I was determined to prove that I could be a part of their lives going forward. Samantha had told me it would take time. Real time, and she was right. Change didn't happen overnight. I couldn't expect everything to be magically fixed just because I'd apologized. It was more than that. I had to be there, day in and day out, and show that I was committed to being the father Emily deserved. At first, it was awkward. Emily would look at me with distrust in her eyes. She was only 12, but she had already learned to depend on herself, to trust only Samantha. I had missed so many of her formative years that I didn't know where to begin. But I didn't let that stop me. I showed up at her school events. I tried to have dinner with them whenever I could. I asked about her day, about her friends, about her dreams. I listened even when it felt like she wasn't ready to share. Slowly but surely, she started to let me in. It wasn't a complete shift, far from it. But the little moments started adding up. The way she'd smile, just slightly, when I asked her about a project she was working on. The way her eyes would soften just a little when I told her how proud I was of her. These small victories were enough to make me keep going. Samantha too was starting to soften, but only just. She had made it clear that this was my chance, that if I wanted to be part of their lives, I had to prove it. And I understood. I had wasted too much time. I had pushed her away and hurt her in ways that couldn't be undone. But I also knew that no matter how long it took, I was ready to rebuild the trust that had been broken. One evening, after a week of late nights working on a new deal for Richards Global, I found myself standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee and staring out the window. It was a quiet night, too quiet, actually. There was a rare peace in the house, and for the first time in years, it felt like everything was in the right place. Samantha and Emily had gone to bed hours ago, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift. It was as if the universe was waiting for me to take the next step. The ringing of my phone broke the stillness. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a second before answering. "Hello," I said, my voice rough from exhaustion. "Maxwell," came a voice I didn't expect. It was Julian. "I think it's time we talk about next steps." "You know what I mean?" My pulse quickened. Julian had been an odd presence in all of this. While he wasn't exactly a threat, his relationship with Samantha had been a source of tension for me. He was a good man. He was kind, genuine, and he cared deeply for Samantha and Emily. That, of course, had always made me feel threatened, even though I knew I had no right to feel that way. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as possible. "I mean," he said calmly, "you've been showing up, Maxwell. You've been doing the work, and it's starting to show. But there's still a long road ahead. If you're serious about this, about being there for Samantha and Emily, you need to be prepared for what's coming next." His words made my heart skip a beat. What was coming next? Was this some kind of test? "I'm ready," I said, not entirely sure what I was agreeing to, but feeling like I had no choice. "I'm in this for them." "Good," Julian replied. "But remember, this isn't about you. It's about Emily. It's about Samantha's happiness. Don't make the same mistakes again. Be honest with yourself. If you want this to work, you can't just say you're here. You have to show it." His words hit me hard. Show it. I had spent so long thinking that money, status, and power could make up for the years I had missed, for the mistakes I had made. But the truth was, none of that mattered. What mattered was that I could finally be, and I had to earn my place in their lives, piece by piece. The conversation ended, and I was left alone with my thoughts, staring out the window at the city below. The lights of San Francisco twinkled in the distance, but the noise of the city felt distant, almost muted. The quiet of the night felt louder than anything I had ever heard. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Samantha and Emily had moved on, and I had a lot of proving to do. But I wasn't running anymore. For the first time in years, I had no illusions about what needed to be done. I had been a fool for so long, thinking I could control everything. But now I knew that the only thing I could control was my actions, my choices. Would I ever be able to fix the past? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. I was willing to try. For Emily, for Samantha, for the family I had left behind, and for the chance to build something new. A few days later, Samantha and I had another conversation. This time, it was quieter, softer. There was no anger, no accusation, just two people sitting across from each other, acknowledging the past, but not letting it define their future. Samantha was willing to let me be a part of their lives, but it was clear that nothing would be handed to me. I would have to prove myself over time. I wasn't sure how long it would take for her to fully trust me again. And Emily, well, Emily was a different story altogether. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance. Maybe not to fix everything, but to build something new. Something real. There was no certainty in the future. It was all open, all unknown. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to face it, whatever it would bring. And in the end, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any of us could ask for.